Okay, episode 2 of Lanterns definitely slows things down from that premiere, and I still think episode 1 is the strongest episode, for now. But weirdly enough, I think I'm more interested in the mystery now than I was last week, because we're starting to get little pieces of what's actually going on, but every time the show gives us an answer, I feel like I have two more questions. And the biggest thing that's still working for me is Hal and John. Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre have this weird relationship where half the time it feels like they fucking hate each other, and then you'll get these little moments where you can see that relationship slowly changing. But something episode 2 really made me appreciate is that this show is actually interested in the fact that Green Lanterns are essentially space cops. Not just superheroes, they're actually investigating. They're looking at evidence, they're putting things together, and I don't feel like we get to see that side of Green Lanterns nearly enough. So yeah, this episode is slower, but I'm still invested. The mystery got more interesting, and there are a couple things here that I really want answers to. So, spoilers from here on out. I think the best place to start is actually with Hal and John, because even though they spend a decent amount of time in this episode apart, I feel like we learn more about both of them because of it. We start with Hal trying to teach John how to fly, and John is not very good at it. Instead, he creates this little bird construct. Okay, whatever. Except when he takes his ring off, the bird doesn't disappear, and Hal immediately notices that. That's the first thing that really caught my attention because Hal's reaction tells us that John just did something he probably should not be able to do. And it doesn't stop there. That bird follows John throughout the episode. It survives while he's not wearing the ring, and even later when Anton has John, Anton notices too. So clearly there's something going on here. Now, there is a cool John Stewart connection from the comics. John is an architect, and he's always been known for making ridiculously detailed constructs. He doesn't just imagine like a gun and make a green gun. He essentially builds that shit from the inside out, down to the individual components. That's something DC specifically identifies as unique to how John uses his ring. But this feels like something different because we're not talking about John being good at constructs. We're talking about construct continuing to exist without the ring. And I don't know what that means yet. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I figured it out. But clearly, Hal notices something special about John. And by the end of the episode, apparently he's not the only one. We'll come back to that. Then Hal sends John to Coast City to get his Green Lantern battery. And first of all, Coast City, I like getting those little DC things without somebody stopping the episode to explain why they're important. But I really enjoyed what they did with John at Hal's house. He finds all of Hal's old suits. He holds one of them up against himself. He finds the battery hidden in this weird pocket dimensional space. And I feel like this is the point where being Green Lantern starts becoming a little more real for John. And there's another layer to it because Hal clearly doesn't want that life anymore. John is walking around a house filled with all these Green Lantern shit belonging to a guy who seems like he's basically done being Green Lantern. I like that. And apparently, separating them like this was very intentional. The companion podcast talked about putting John in Coast City and Hal in Rushville while still letting the two stories develop their relationship. John is basically learning about Hal while Hal isn't even there. And then there's fucking Earl, which I actually looked this up because I thought, is there some obscure ass Green Lantern plant I've never heard of? No. The writers basically wanted their version of Hal's pet, and one of them came up with this giant carnivorous plant because it fit his prickly version of Hal. She apparently didn't even think Earl would make it all the way into the show. He did. So now Hal Jordan has a murderous houseplant. Meanwhile, Hal is doing something I really liked. He's actually being a detective. Those detectors at the football field don't make sense to him. So instead of just having the ring magically tell him everything, he starts testing shit. He grabs a car bumper, nothing. Eventually, this man decides to take bodies out of the morgue and drag them through the detectors, which is very Hal Jordan way of solving this problem. And it works. They're not detecting metal, they're detecting aliens. That's a small thing, but this is exactly what I want from the grounded approach they're taking. If Green Lanterns are basically intergalactic cops, let them do cop shit. Let Hal form a theory. Let him test it, let him be wrong sometimes, let him investigate. We don't need every problem solved because the ring scans something. And now that investigation points him right back toward Bully Macon, because Macon has technology Hal doesn't recognize. He has this mysterious benefactor, and he's clearly protecting something on that property. There's also another little thing Hal notices after he gets shot. The hospital is basically empty, and some of the equipment hasn't even been unpacked. Maybe that's nothing, but now I'm looking at everything in Rushville sideways. Where is Macon getting this technology? Who the hell is his benefactor? Why is this town apparently prepared for things that a normal town in Nebraska shouldn't be prepared for? I don't know, but something about Rushville itself just feels off now. And while Hal is dealing with all that, John gets kidnapped. He puts up a pretty good fight, escapes onto the highway, and then gets absolutely smoked by a car. But eventually, Anton explains why they're actually there. They're looking for a Manhunter. And this is where I think the show found a really smart way of taking Green Lantern comic lore and fitting it into this grounded mystery. because Manhunters are old school Green Lantern mythology. Before the Guardians created the Green Lantern Corps, they tried something else. They created Manhunters, basically an artificial intergalactic police force, and that went horribly wrong. The Guardians eventually replaced them with the Green Lantern Corps, but the Manhunters became one of the biggest failures in the Guardians' history. And apparently, this wasn't just some random Green Lantern villain the writers decided to throw in there. Tom King said that the Manhunters came up during those original meetings where they were figuring out the DCU because the idea immediately clicked. The organization responsible for the Green Lantern Corps has this deep, dark secret from the time they tried to police the universe before and completely fucked it up. That fits this show really well because now this isn't just, find the alien hiding in Nebraska. We're uncovering something the Green Lantern Corps itself might not want people digging into. And the show's version of the Manhunters makes the mystery even better because apparently they can create new bodies and embed themselves into other societies. They can also create technology beyond what those societies should be capable of producing. And as soon as I heard that, my brain went right back to Macon because what did Hal just discover? Technology he doesn't recognize. I'm not saying Macon is a manhunter. Honestly, that might be way too obvious, but now his technology means something completely different. This also starts connecting back to something from episode 1, Abin Sur. We already know he ended up near Rushville. That's where Hal got his ring. And after John tells Hal everything, they start putting together a pretty dark possibility. Maybe Abin Sur brought the Manhunter to Earth. Maybe the Manhunter killed him. And that's ultimately how the ring ended up choosing Hal. Now that is interesting because suddenly Hal's entire history as Green Lantern could be connected to the mystery they're investigating right now. This isn't some random case Hal happened to stumble into. He might have been part of it since the day he got his ring. And that gives Rushville a much bigger significance than I originally thought. And underneath all this, I think Hal is slowly gaining respect for John. They're still giving each other shit, that hasn't changed. But Hal's reaction to the bird is different. John comes back after everything that happened to him and actually tells Hal about the Manhunters, even though Anton told him not to. And when John basically gives Hal shit for not congratulating him about the bird, Hal gives him this little hoorah. It's small, but you can feel the relationship moving. It's gradual, and that's working much better for me. Then, in the end, Hal puts the suit on, and yeah, I don't hate it. I also don't love it. It's fine. There's something about it compared to the traditional Green Lantern suit that just looks a little weird to me. Same thing with some of the flying earlier in the episode. There are a couple effects where I'm like, but when Hal actually takes off toward the end, that looked pretty fucking cool. And more importantly, I like what that moment means. We've spent 2 episodes with this older Hal who seems almost completely checked out being Green Lantern. John goes into his house and finds all these old suits just sitting there. Then this case gets serious enough that Hal finally decides, okay, I need to be Green Lantern again. And where does he go? To somebody from his past. Sinestro. If you know Green Lantern, you know this isn't just some random villain cameo. Sinestro used to be Hal's mentor. Kyle Chandler actually described him as almost a father figure to Hal, and the creators said they're approaching this version of Sinestro almost like Hannibal Lecter. He's behind bars, he's dangerous, but Hal needs information from somebody who knows him probably better than almost anyone else. And I love that approach because Hal walks in basically like, what the fuck do you know about Manhunters? And Sinestro tells him, if one still exists, that's only the second biggest threat you're dealing with. Okay, then what's number 1? And then Sinestro asks him about John Stewart. How the fuck does he know about John? Because as far as we know, Sinestro is sitting in this prison. John is basically brand new, and Sinestro not only knows who he is, he apparently thinks he's important enough to bring up while Hal is asking about a manhunter. Now, go back to the beginning. John creates a construct, takes off the ring, it stays. Hal notices, Anton notices, and now Sinestro is asking about John. I don't know what they're building toward, and I'm not going to spoil myself trying to figure it out, but there's clearly something about John that we, and probably John himself, don't understand yet. And honestly, that's where episode 2 leaves me. I have way more questions now than I did after the premiere. What exactly is happening with John? How does Sinestro know about him? What is Macon protecting? Who is his benefactor? Is the technology connected to the Manhunter? Did Abin Sur actually bring it to Earth? Did it kill him? And then there's still the giant question hanging over this entire show. What happens to Hal between 2016 and the body John finds 10 years later? Because I still haven't forgotten about that. And I'm also still not completely convinced everything about that body is what it appears to be. Episode 1 already established that there are extraterrestrial species capable of mimicking biological signs well enough to pass as human, and Hal's ring isn't on the body. So I'm keeping an eye on that. I'm just not turning into some formal theory segment anymore. So yeah, Episode 1 is still the stronger episode for me. Episode 2 slows down quite a bit, but I actually think the mystery gets better. We're learning more about how John is starting to grow into being Green Lantern. Their relationship is slowly developing without suddenly making them best friends. And I really like how they're starting to pull more of the actual Green Lantern mythology into this grounded detective story because now we're not just investigating some weird shit happening in Nebraska. We're starting to uncover things connected to the Guardians, the history of the corpse, Abin's Sur, Hal's past, and apparently something about John Stewart that even Sinestro is interested in. That's enough to get me back next week. So let me know. What do you think is going on with John? Who or what do you think is actually hiding in Rushville? And what the hell does Sinestro know? Because right now, I don't trust anybody in the town. But yeah, we'll see what episode 3 gives us.